Welcome to Level Up with Tipi, where we tackle the issues and challenges affecting 911 telecommunicators. Your host, Tipi Brookins, has decades of leadership experience in public safety communications. Here's Tipi.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am super excited today to be here with you all. This is going to be our part 3, our last and final piece of our 3-part series on wellness and mental health for our telecommunicators. And today, I am going to have a very candid conversation with a guest today out of Memphis, Tennessee. And I'm super excited because, as we talk about wellness and, just so many things that surrounds wellness, this guest, we met on LinkedIn and we had a conversation, and I just felt it would just really be great to have him on the vlog on Level Up with Tipi today. And I'm going to turn this over to Kenneth Robinson, formerly with the Memphis Police Department, so that he can give us his introduction and just tell us some more about his background.
Tipi, I want to first thank you for this opportunity and thank you for inviting me. It is truly an honor. It's truly an honor. I have been researching and doing some background on GovWorx and on some of the platforms that you have, and I am truly excited. I thank you for the opportunity to be able to talk about mental wellness, especially in particular to the 911 wellness matrix part of it. I think that that's one of the it's overlooked a lot, because a lot of times in my career, we do a lot of things and we just hear a voice telling us, call goes here. Do you need this? Backup, go here. But sometimes it's overlooked on how impactful what we're doing, what they're doing is on them. And it became a focus later in my career. And so I thank you for the opportunity for that. A little bit about me. I'm a retired police officer. Spent 22 years in law enforcement, spent 17 with Memphis. The remaining time was in Greenville, Mississippi, Greenville Police Department. During my time, I was a CIT officer, which is a crisis intervention officer with Memphis Police Department. I also was a peer counselor with the department. And for those that are unaware of what peer counselors and CIT officers do, CIT officers, we respond to those that are in crisis, those that have mental challenges and they're in crisis, whether it be them off of their meds or they're having an episode. We would go and we would be the ones trained to actually be able to intervene in order to get them to some type of normalcy and then get them to some help. As far as peer counseling, what we would do, we're there for the officers. Whenever there's critical incidents, whenever there have been mass casualty events, whenever there anything that's of a traumatic nature to officers, we would be there to kind of observe and see if the officers need some type of special attention. We would also sit in on debriefings, and we would sit in on the debriefings and be able to kind of be there in an additional support to the psychological and the clinical staff that was there, to be another support for the officers. So it runs hand in hand. It's just that one is a little bit higher level and a little more intense than the other. They all have their pros and cons and dynamics, but the biggest thing that they have in common is the mental state, the mental wellness part of it. And so for that part, I'm glad that this ties into that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction. And so as we start this conversation, the 911 wellness matrix, from acute stress to organizational strength. And so, just really highlighting your mission to break down the tough it out culture and replace it with actionable, holistic health strategies. And so when we talk about spotting the red flags, mental health and the stigma barrier, before we can treat stress, burnout, or PTSD, we have to recognize them. What are the subtle warning signs leaders and peers should look for? And how do we dismantle the legacy, tough it out organizational culture that keeps people from asking for help?
Many times in law enforcement and with any emergency responders, if you're ever in the atmosphere of just being around a group of officers, you'll notice a couple of things. You'll notice that there are some sense of numbness to some type of events. You'll notice that there are the emotions are not the same as what you would see a normal human being doing, and so that kind of, and that's one of those phases where what's going on is we're really packing in what we're seeing in the dynamic that we're in. And so it'll look strong, it'll look bold. It doesn't look like stress. And the only times that when you kind of see it and it kind of sticks out is when it's one of our own on a large scale, or there's a small child involved, or we happen to make a call where there's a family member involved. So stress doesn't quite look like stress, but it's still stress. So any type of incident that we deal with, it has an impact. It leaves an impression. Because we're in an environment where we're constantly going and not doing a whole lot of analyzing, it gets packed down, packed down, packed down, and packed down. And then over time, you'll start seeing signs. And signs could look anywhere, like you'll see some officers. I've seen times where officers that I've known for years start the grooming standards for how I was used to seeing them, how it changes. And I'll walk to the officer, hey man, everything good? How are things going with you? How's life? How's the family? To try to kind of see what's going on, because you notice some of the physical attributes are changing. You start seeing where some people have there's increased irritability. They have some emotional numbness. When they have sarcasm will replace empathy in certain situations. You have sometimes where people become withdrawn from coworkers. And whereas in the past, they were real outgoing, bubbly. You'll see where sometimes people will, some personnel they'll work an excessive amount of overtime because of family stress at home. So they're trying to avoid going home and want to work overtime. You'll see sick leave start to increase. So the list it's a long, drawn out list. Trouble sleeping, which are things that you don't really see at work, but what you end up doing is like, man, why are they late? What's going on? And sometimes we just don't ask the questions. You'll also see some things like loss of confidence. When you have conversations, they'll give those verbal cues of where they're really not confident in what they're doing. They're not sure. And then you'll see where some just have they just look emotionally exhausted. And so sometimes you see a lot of officers. I've even seen where some people, when you say officers as well, but you'll see where some of the people that are the overachievers, I guess you would want to say, or that are really working and they're putting their foot to the grind every single day, sometimes it's a mask for things that are really going on underneath. And so you have to be sensitive to the full environment of what's going on. And also it causes you to have to be close to those that you actually work with, and not just have to where I'm just casual, I'm just here to do my 8 and go home. You have to really get to know who you're working with. In organizations, you tend to see where you have sometimes you get these levels of burnout in the organization. And sometimes it can come from the top down, where you have to do mandatory overtime. I know my last few years with Memphis Police Department, there was the moment because short staff, everybody's dealing with short staffing. And so you have to do mandatory overtimes. At one point, we had to do that in the streets as far as mandatory overtime. So a lot of that it has this wear and tear, and you don't get that recovery time that you need to keep yourself functioning at a high rate. So those are kind of the broad things of what you can see on the front end. You were talking about the stigmas. Law enforcement, any type of emergency response, there is this stigma of you have to present this bold wall. You have to present this presence that you have every I dotted and every T crossed. Many times that's not the case. Sometimes there are situations where we're trying to figure it out just like you are. We're trying to see what's the right way to be able to handle this within policy and within law and within moral bounds. So all of those things are come back at the same time. The difference that I think that it brings with now in the 911 aspect of it is dispatchers are operating from sound. You're watching computer screens, you're hearing voices, you're talking to people, and you're not actually seeing the physical fruits of what's going on. You're not seeing what's actually happening. You're left to within your own mind to process what this looks like. How is this going? Am I doing this right? Am I following policy? What do I do? I'm trying to calm this person down. So it's a lot of chaos going on, but the only help you can give is what you speak. And then after all that calms down, now you're left with being able to process all that. And it can be a heavy weight. And it's hard when you process only what you hear and you're left to your own mind as to what it actually looks like. Because many times, there were times we had critical incidents and I knew the dispatcher played a big role in what was going on, and I would call dispatch. If the dispatcher was still on the radio, I would call, "Hey, you good? Everything okay?" Or they'll say, call 2700, and so you call and actually speak to your dispatcher, and dispatcher want to know everything okay, you good. It gets to where you build those bonds and you understand. A lot of people just overlook it. Did I miss anything as a part of that question?
No, I think you've given us so many things because again, with this level up series with myself and with our guests, the one thing is that we're trying to help others with resources. And you mentioned a bunch of things, right? As it looks, what does that look like? You said numbness to events. You also said stress doesn't look like stress. We could present like everything is normal, but inside we're suffering, right? And so
Right.
as it relates to telecommunicators, like you said, the sound is the main thing. And I remember someone told me is that we fear what we hear, not what we see. And
Right.
so when you're hearing these things, it's no telling what that image actually looks like to a telecommunicator based on what they've heard. And so you also mentioned, over time, you start to see things, grooming changes, increase in irritability, sarcasm versus the empathy, increased sick leave, loss of confidence, and just overall emotional exhaustion. And, even though you were in the field, there was still something that made you call dispatch to say, you know what, let me check on that dispatcher. And you'd be surprised. That matters the most, to check
Mm-hmm.
in, to let them know that someone knows what you just experienced. And we want to make sure that you're okay. So thank you for some of those signs because again, people that are watching this, they may not know, but
Mm-hmm.
you're able to give those as an officer having that crisis intervention experience and also peer counseling. And so when we go into speaking about the mind body connection, tactical resilience and physical wellness, resilience isn't just a mental state. It's deeply physical. How do things like nutrition, sleep, physical fitness protect a dispatcher's brain during high stress shifts? And what are some healthy, immediate coping strategies right after a traumatic call?
That's a good question. Many times people often compare athletes to tactical teams. And And when you think about the dynamics of that as it relates to dispatchers, I would say I compare dispatchers to air traffic controllers. You know, you look at you anytime you've ever seen a video or a picture of the board, what they call the board, as far as air traffic control is concerned, you see a whole lot of lines and numbers, and they clearly understand it, and they're responsible for a lot of those lines. Each person has their certain number of lines that they're responsible, lines and numbers they're responsible for. But everything they're doing is not where they visually see it, and they're multitasking a lot. And so with dispatchers, it's the same way. So they're doing a lot of elite cognitive performance, but it also requires elite recovery, if that makes sense. So if I'm talking about all this and it sounds like, you know, I have a personal training background as well, so I dabble a little bit in that. So with sleep, the brain processes emotional. The brain will process emotional trauma. Poor sleep impacts their recovery, just like lack of sleep will impact any of our daily performance. So poor sleep, it increases anxiety. You have, if you're getting poor sleep, it can lead to depression, irritability. Your reaction time is diminished. You can see where sometimes you have memory problems, or you just have fatigue in your decision-making process. It just seems like you're just not able to process as normal. You can get one poor night of sleep, and it'll affect just a little bit of your performance for that next day. But imagine somebody that's not sleeping for years, not getting good sleep for years. Short story, when I retired, one of the things that I dealt with for like 4.5, almost 5 months is I was only getting broken sleep. It was like 1 or 2 hours of sleep. And so I actually called the psychologist that I'm friends with, and I asked him, I said, hey man, what's going on? I'm not getting good sleep. You know, I'm steady having nightmares, you know, reliving stuff that I had never even processed and thought about for years. And he explained to me that when most retirees, when they retire, because they're not in that mode of constantly compacting what they see every day, their body goes basically into withdrawals, just like any other addiction would be. And so he gave me the former name. I can't remember it now. But he was like, it's a process of getting your body's trying to get over that hump of what it's been used to doing for years. And I never knew that was a thing. And there's many retirees that I had to come in contact with and people that had left the job. Nobody ever mentioned that. And then, so now when I see retirees, I don't care if it's EMA, dispatch, I ask them, how are you sleeping? How are things going? How are you mentally? So that way, I've been there, done that. I care about what's going on with you. And so that makes a difference. In the aspect of nutrition, of course, we all know you don't eat right, your body's not going to respond the same. Most of the time with dispatchers, because in the squad car, we're moving around, we're driving around, we get better options. Dispatchers, you're sitting up there on what we call on the floor. You're on the floor. You can't just leave and just go to your favorite restaurant. So your food options are not the best. Most of the time it's fast food. Some of them are drinking energy drinks. You have that coffee, which is constantly being made. You have sugaries, those high sugar snacks that they have. And what that does is it creates that dramatic blood sugar swings. And so that causes its own set of problems, because when you have the blood sugar, instability, you'll get those very mood swings. Your decision making might be a little bit foggy. Your stress tolerance changes quite a bit. And then also it affects your concentration, which, you know, as a dispatcher, we want to be focused. Just like in police work, we don't want to be where we're lacking in concentration, because that can cause us to get hurt. You want to be focused. But if you can figure out a way, I've seen officers that bring their own meals. They bring us cooler and they have all of their bodybuilder type meals, I would guess you would say, because it's that lean chicken, and all their carbs is all measured in their what are the bodybuilders called? Their meal prep trays. And so that's the way they kind of get by and keep that edge. And you can tell when you're looking at things from that 30,000 foot up view, you will see where their level of performance in the moment is different than somebody we may know that's not eating so healthy, that's not able to do the things in process. They're eating fast food on a regular basis. It's a difference in performance. Movement, the body's designed to move. When we're able to move around, we're because dispatchers, they're always sitting. I don't know if there's any dispatchers that are doing I guess you have the keyboard stand that raises up when you can stand up and do it. I don't know if that's a thing, but most of the time it's sitting. So your movement decreases. When the movement decreases, you have issues with cortisol levels, inflammation, you have muscle tension. You also have your movement is just, not to mention your joints now have become restricted. And so next thing you know, you have all these stuff. And then not to mention in any emergency responding field, and you're not doing things healthily, you're not moving like you're supposed to, you get that weight gain, then we start having other problems. So, but when we are getting increased athletic movement or physical movement, you have better moves. When you get somebody going to the gym and they're used to going to the gym on a regular basis, their natural energy is just always high. They're always going. They have this extra pep about their step, as we say. Their mental clarity improves. How you see and process things greatly improves. Sleep improves. You have a higher energy level. And even if it's just 5 minutes is better than no minutes at all of just moving around. So the best way I can say in fast forwarding to critical incidents or tactical recovery after a difficult situation, you have to take a pause. And as soon as you can, take a pause. I know that some departments, and so I've spoken to several different agencies and how they kind of handle critical incidents. I've spoken to several different dispatchers for different agencies on how their departments handle critical incidents as it relates to dispatchers. Some of them, they'll have the pause. There are agencies that they really don't have a protocol. You have smaller departments, 1 or 2 dispatchers. That's all they have. I was in, not to call out the agency, but I was down in Alabama and I was talking to an officer, and one of his best friends is a dispatcher. And he was saying one of the hardest days of his career was working an accident with the dispatcher on the phone, and the person that was involved in the accident had passed, but it was the dispatcher's family member, and she's the only one that was working. And so not only do you have the impact of how that affects the officer and those that are responding to it, you have a parent on the other end of the phone who can't leave to come there with their, to be there. Can't leave, they have to stay there. They're the only one working. So it's a lot. So you have to get to where hopefully you can pause to kind of pull yourself back a little bit. Then I would encourage you, don't try to rush to another emotional event. Some agencies have it to whereas if there's a critical incident, depending on if it's within the parameters of their policy, that dispatcher is actually taken off the radio or either taken off the radio and sent home. So it just depends on the levels. But every agency is not run that way. Once you get a chance to actually pull back or to kind of get yourself together, have to get some good breathing in to kind of let me process, let me get this out, let me try to get some normalcy about myself. And so hydration will probably play a factor, because you are dealing with levels of shock, whether it be big or whether it's small. You're dealing with some form of shock to a degree. Some people, I've heard some talk about maybe doing some stretching, do a brief walk to kind of get it out your system a little bit, kind of trying to clear your mind. I don't think that I've ever done that, but it's a possibility that works for some. Then I would say try to normalize. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
The biggest thing I would say is try to normalize emotions if you can. And it depends on some situations. Some situations it's easier said than done to normalize. I've been on calls where there's an officer involved incident and coworker didn't make it. The last thing on my mind at the time was normalizing emotions, because there's so much that goes through your mind. You feel anger, you feel hurt, you feel rage, you wish you could have done something different. And then to be there, and then you having to stay on the scene to do this, and it's one of your own, it's kind of hard to process all of it like that. So a lot of these things are things that they may be on paper, but actually being able to execute them in real life, sometimes it's easier said than done. And it creates a mindset to where you have to have the mental wherewithal to say, hold on a minute, I need to get a grip of myself. Or somebody there say, hey man, let's get you back on a level plane. Right now there's a lot going on. Let's calm you down. Let's get you calmed down. Come over and have a seat, give you some water. Talk through the process of trying to calm them down a little bit. But you have to, that's a team, that becomes a team effort at that point. But recovery looks different. So what may take me 5-10 minutes to get myself together may take you 24 to 48 hours. And it looks different, to somebody else. And sometimes there's some incidents that you don't recover. Some people have not recovered at all. And some may recover in a few days and a few months. So it just pretty much kind of one of those things that it depends on the person. It depends on the environment. And when I say environment, I mean policy, engagement from top down. Did we talk about long-term as far as what long-term recovery kind of looks like? We have to establish routines. When I was in patrol, and especially when I was working midnight shift, I would get off work, go straight to the gym. And so that was my way of, I guess, purging from everything that had happened that night on that shift. I would go to the gym, get me a good workout in, give me a nice meal, watch a little TV that was non-news related TV, and then get some sleep. So, but for other people, it may look like just taking little walks, doing some strength training, faith, doing things to exercise your faith, journaling. I've seen some officers that actually they journal. I've also seen where, counseling. We do have whereas that was offered. Counseling was an opportunity if you need it. I think that back then we were using Concern was who we were outreach to as far as counseling was concerned. Peer support groups. You have a lot of officers that get together. You have dispatchers that get together. And so some of that was able to kind of say, hey, I'm with somebody that can relate to what I've seen, what I've experienced. And so we can talk through that process. And it's a way of healing, being able to have that group time. Then you have find extra healthy hobbies. Find a purpose outside of the badge. Whether your badge is 911, whether it's EMA, whether it's police fire, find another purpose outside of that. Whether that's coaching, whether that's going out there and just volunteering and doing things, something that that pushes you to a whole nother level to where you're not processing the weight of everything that you're dealing with.
Yep, and those are all great things. And so, as you mentioned early on in your response, you made the analogy between the dispatcher and air traffic controller, and those professions are definitely very similar because we're making dispatchers and telecommunicators are making decisions, and we are speaking to someone and helping them to make decisions. So definitely, how you mentioned how poor sleep increases anxiety, depression in your reaction time, and as a telecommunicator, we need our sleep. And then food, how it affects your blood sugar instability, mood swings, and stress tolerance and your concentration in conversation, right? And then lastly, that movement piece. As far as telecommunicators, for those that are able and they have the ergonomic environments where their desks are able to lift up and they can stand during their shift. Then
Good.
there are some agencies that don't. I will say that there is an agency in Virginia that actually has like different exercising pieces where they can actually pick it up from the supervisor's console and sit at their desk and do stretches, different things
Great.
that they've put in place. So the one thing I can say about wellness, it hasn't been on the forefront, but it is now on the forefront because this is
Great.
something that we have to be more proactive about and not reactive. And like you said, lastly, normalize your emotions. Everybody's recovery time is going to be different, but it's okay to not be okay.
Exactly.
Normalize that. You know what I mean? I can
Yes,
speak
ma'am.
to an incident. I went home after a major incident. I went home. I was home for about a week. Everyone else's recovery was different from that. I did not want to go back to 911. But after
Mm,
being home by myself for 7 days and dealing with the guilt and did I do anything wrong? I finally got it together and I went back. So my recovery time was 7 days being alone. However, everyone is different. And so when we go into talking about critical incidents in the home front, when a massive event occurs, like a mass casualty incident or a line of duty death, like you mentioned, you somewhat touched on, the impact ripples outward. What does best practice critical incident response look like, and how do peer support teams bridge the gap between the comm center and a dispatcher's family life?
best practice response. Mm, I would say that healthy organizations, if you were to picture what it would look like, a healthy organization will actually activate support immediately. When longevity and mental well-being is on the forefront, as well as being effective in our job performance, then getting them the support they need needs to be immediate. It needs to happen fast, not months later. That response would kind of look like you have supervisor contact on checking the well-being of the officer, checking to see what's going on, or the dispatcher. Then you have your lines of peer support, whereas you actually have people trained to actually look for signs, check on that person, because there are a lot of things that you would say to someone who's just a regular dispatcher like you and not a supervisor, because there's not a line, but there is a line. And so sometimes it's good to have those peers that are on that same level that can see things and relate to those dispatchers in a way that a supervisor used to, but can't now because they're in a supervisory role. They need psychological first aid, basically, if that would make sense. You have critical incidents, and they have counselors that come in. They have psychologists to come in. They have clinicians to come in for any type of emotional, any type of supportive needs that anybody may need. You have I guess what you would call operational relief, to whereas depend on the incident and depend on the situation, you have officers. I know that there have been times where officers were sent home for the rest of the evening, and you have You would have other precincts to come in and handle the call load for that particular precinct because of the situation that was going on. You have operation release where dispatchers are relieved and sent home. And then you have somebody to check on and follow up with them to make sure everything's okay. And then you also have those immediate debriefings to kind of see how they're processing, what's going on. And most of the time that will occur within 24 to 72 hours, depending on the department's policy. Then you have situations to where there needs to be some form of family education. I think that's one of the things that's overlooked is because most officers, any type of emergency responders, even dispatchers, your family, unless they work in that field, they're left to try to figure it out on their own. And we have a tendency of not saying when I've had a long day, this is what will help me best process. There's most of the time it's not that. We're left to teach on our own, or the family members most of the time are left to figure it out on their own. I think that agencies need to incorporate some kind of way of doing some type of family education on how to help officers, dispatchers, anybody in emergency response, any emergency responder, how to help them also help yourself through those processes, those ups and downs of the job itself. Then you have what we call follow-up checks, and that would include whether it's on the supervisory level or whether that would be on the peer level. It just depends on each agency kind of do things a little bit different. And then I think the opportunity to access, clinical help if needed. I don't know how many. There's a stigma along with that, to whereas if you call a hotline, it's a negative on you as a person when it comes to the job, and that stigma needs to change, because you shouldn't be where you're working and you're carrying those loads, and it's basically self-destructing you from the inside out. It should be okay to say, "Hey man, I need help." Hey sister, I need some help. It shouldn't be where that's looked at in the negative, and it should be looked at more in the positive, because I want to see you thrive. I want to see you succeed. I want to see you experience life beyond the profession. And putting all those negatives, putting things that don't quote look correct in the civilian world, you have to, hey man, it's okay to say you need help. And I'm gonna walk with you through that process to help you get what you need. And that's not a normal undertaking. And then you have to have some type of recovery plan. Most people kind of go with the process, the recovery part. They don't plan out what their recovery looks like. They kind of handle it as it comes. And that can be overwhelming, because each situation don't look like what you plan or how you think. And so I think you need to have some type of recovery plan, like your little go-to book. Even if you had to write in your little black book and say, "Look, I've had an incident," read that. See if it's, I've seen officers where after the incident, they'll step aside and they'll pray. I've seen officers that'll step away and they have a book, and I ask, what you have, what do you normally, because I see you do that on a regular basis. What's going on? I go and I start reading positive affirmations. So it depends on the person. What does it take for you to make it basically your best practice after a critical incident? What's your response to it? In the aspect of peer support, I want to say peers have to provide, I guess, credibility. And when I say that, if I was to come and I have to be able to say, "Tipi, it's okay to talk to me. I'm not, what you tell me is what you tell me. I just want to make sure you're okay and that you're processing things healthily, and that you're not, that if you need any help, I'm here to help you. So sometimes we'll have these stigmas where we can't trust. And you have to be able to have that level of confidentiality, whereas you talk about what needs to be talked about, but if it gets to a point, and how that it's what I tell when I was training athletes, I would tell my athletes, I don't believe in betraying trust. So you can feel comfortable in talking to me about whatever it is bothering you. And when you talk to me, I want you to understand this. One, I'm going to try to help you as best as possible to succeed beyond whatever is bothering you or whatever is stressing you, whatever you're dealing with. Two, if it's serious enough, we're going to have to go and get serious help. And I'm going to be there with you through that whole process. And that carries over the same way when it comes, whether it be law enforcement, emergency services, fire, dispatch. You have to have that credibility, because that means a whole lot. It speaks volumes when I can talk to you and you know that I'm not running and making it everybody else's business what's going on with you. But you also know, hey man, if we need to get some help, we need to go get this help together to make sure you're okay. And so that's kind of one of the things that miss. When we talk about, I mentioned earlier about family, family members, they actually are the ones that notice the changes in us first. And so when it comes to that, but they're also the ones that are not, they are rarely educated on what to do, how to do, who to call, how to make heads or tail of what's going on. So we have to teach family. I think that one of the things, a few things that are important to teach family members are being hypervigilant in what's going on. Noticing any type of sleep disruptions that may be going on with with their family member, any type of emotional withdrawals. Pay attention to the sign. Don't just think that he or she just need a minute. It might be more than just a minute that's needed. They might have always fatigue because they're mentally drained and overwhelmed. Are your family members trained to have healthy communication skills on being able to ask the hard questions, have the conversation? How are you responding to your job? Is there anything that I need to know, of where the stresses of your job is negatively impacting you? Are your thoughts healthy? And then sometimes the family have to understand boundaries, because some of us need time and just need space to kind of process. Some family members don't know what giving boundaries are. They just constantly want to come in. They want to have conversations. Some of them want to come and just unload everything they got. And guess what? You have to process it. They expect you to be ready for whatever is coming. And then family members need to understand, what recovery expectations kind of look like. My response to situations may not look like a person that don't deal with the things that I see on a regular basis. Your response is going to be different. You might get upset because they deliver your package to the wrong house. Well, my thing is, I just had to deal with a call where a child didn't make it.
And they don't understand, they can't relate,
And they don't understand, they can't relate.
They can't relate. And that's one thing I can say it was always a struggle for me. My family, they did not understand what I did. And my friends, they would joke about it. Oh, when I would work a lot of overtime, but I had really no one to talk about those incidents. But I could talk to my coworkers. And just to highlight some of the things that you mentioned, which these are awesome resources: activation of support immediately after an incident, that psychological first aid, that's so important. And agencies that are able to do it or have the means to do it, that clinical support coming into the center for that operational relief. And then that family education is something that you mentioned was a highlight. I think it's overlooked. I think we could do a better job in helping to educate our family members. And then you said it's okay to say, I need help. It's okay without worrying
Right.
about that stigma. And then a recovery plan, a real good recovery plan in order to follow it. And then that last piece, peer support, and having them to be able to provide the credibility, and then also that confidentiality, because that's one thing with our peer support in comm centers. You
Mhm.
have a lot of your peers that are on the peer support, and they worry if I speak to them, if this is going to go further. So I think
Right.
highlighting that was super important. And so I just really, really hope that our audience today really got something from our conversation. And I really, really appreciate, just the in-depth knowledge that you have in this field as it relates to wellness and mental health. And so, as this wraps up our three-part wellness journey, I want to thank you, Kenneth, and I just want to thank you all so much for holding space with me over these last three videos. Remember, taking care of your mind isn't a destination, it's a daily practice, and you don't have to do it perfectly. Take just one thing you've learned from these videos in this series and put it into practice. Maybe not today, tomorrow, maybe next week or next month. Don't forget to protect your space, check in
Mhm.
on your friends, your coworkers, and most importantly, check in on yourself. Be
Yes.
kind to yourself. And I will see you in the next Level Up with Tipi video. Thank you so much.